Well, the virus has now killed more than 100 people in China, and new cases have been confirmed around the world.
So you don't want to frighten the American public.
France and South Korea have also got evacuation plans.
But you need to prepare for and assume
strongly warning Americans to avoid all non-essential travel to China.
That this is going to be a real serious problem.
France, Australia, Canada, the US, Singapore, Cambodia, Vietnam, the list goes on.
Health officials are investigating more than 100 possible cases in the US.
Germany, a man has contracted the virus.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
Japan, where a bus driver contracted the virus.
Coronavirus has killed more than 100 people there and infected more than 4,500.
We have to prepare for the worst, always, because if you don't and the worst happens...
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
When there is police misconduct, the justice system must hold wrongdoers fully and completely accountable, and it will. But when we can never have a situation where things are going on as they are today, we must never allow mob rule. We can never allow mob rule. In the strongest possible terms, the Republican Party condemns the rioting, looting, arson, and violence we have seen in Democrat-run cities all, like Kenosha, Minneapolis, Portland, Chicago, and New York, and many others, Democrat-run, and cheered the rise of China as a positive development for America and the world, some positive development. That's why China supports Joe Biden and desperately wants him to win. I can tell you that upon very good information. China would own our country if Joe Biden got elected. Unlike Biden, I will hold them fully accountable for the tragedy that they caused all over the world. They caused. In recent months, our nation and the world has been hit by the once-in-a-century pandemic that China allowed to spread around the globe. They could have stopped it, but they allowed it to come out.
Friday, August the 28th, the year of our Lord 2020, episode 358 of War Room Pandemic begins here on the John Fredericks Radio Network on America's Voice. News later on Newsmax TV, and blown through the CCP's firewall by G News and GTV, subtitled in Mandarin, so the great people of China, yearning to be free, get all the information the great deplorables of this nation and the greater West get every single day here on War Room Pandemic. I think last night, gentlemen, was an incredibly historic moment, not just in the fact that we saw the RNC conclude at the White House, something we've never seen before, and lots of consternation amongst the media about that today, but the visuals, the speech, the thematics, and the fact that, as we mentioned in the first hour, you had Kamala Harris go up there to try and kind of pre-butt the president of the United States. You had Nancy Pelosi out there, really forced to go out there by the series of events that had unfolded the 3 days prior and what was about to come in the evening, which was President Trump's speech alongside others last night, other great ones last night. We have clips from Mayor Giuliani and more. And now what's the response today? The response, as far as I've seen on the national news today, it's nitpicking numbers in the speech, the 3.8 trillion, not the 4 trillion, and it's they weren't wearing masks when they went to the speech. Gentlemen?
Look, the scale of it gobsmacked them. They thought even using the White House, they did not expect it to come off this flawlessly, that the Republican party that Ronna McDaniel and the campaign couldn't pull this off. They obviously pulled it off in a much better way than anybody in Hollywood could. It's just absolutely stunning visuals. Scale. How do you do scale? It's not easy. And the thing last night was just, it was magnificent, right? At a scale that's why they're back on their back foot today. You've already had in the last couple of days, we're never going to concede. We're not going to debate. We're going to do pre-bottle everything he does because they weren't doing a good job of coming back because they didn't know how to handle average Americans, normal Americans, right? These were ordinary people talking about extraordinary things in their lives and the policy. And the Democratic Party was caught flat-footed. The Biden campaign was caught flat-footed.
Let me ask you something. Maybe I'm getting too in the weeds here on this, but you're a filmmaker. You know Hollywood pretty well. the only scale that Hollywood knows is destruction. Hollywood movies today that grab people's attention, the very few that still do, are based around destruction.
Comic books, yeah.
They can't do scale that shows uplifting,
Yeah.
powerful, spiritual,
Yeah.
and that's what the Trump campaign did last night.
Aspirational. Last night it was aspirational.
And that's why they couldn't deliver a DNC that was of scale.
But DNC, they completely missed it because it was all tiny town. It was like a Zoom conference, right? Everything they did was small. Everything they did was, and it's not small intimate. It was small funky, right? And it didn't pull you in, right? And that's why I was thinking, hey, I know they're trying to do something totally different on the Republican, but and they took it up 10 notches. I mean, it was, and this is why today they're nervous. So now you're going to see, this is why this is going to be a turnout election. What you saw post, and that's why Trump said we're never going to kneel down to the mob. We're never going to have mob rule. The post activities at the White House is what you're going to see more and more of. I think, intimidation, and that's why it's going to be, hey, you've got to own your vote, right? And you've got to get people out and get registered while there's still time to register. Remember, November 3rd is not election day. It's the last day of election. They're going to be early voting in these states. You've got to get the rules. It's incumbent upon you. People always ask us what to do. Well, hey, now it's very focused. 60 days. You should be pushing out. And look, call to action. Push this show out everywhere. One of the things we try to give you guys is honest insights, right? Honest insights. We try to call it. We have thought the campaign has been, sputtering up until a couple months ago. A part of it, we just said, hey, it's not a campaign. It's really from the White House. Action, action, action. The president's taking that to heart. It's actions every day. I think you're going to see a combination. He's going to give them a combo platter. Actions from the White House, and then going around in more, I don't call them intimate settings. I think he'll be doing airport rallies, but going to a factory. They want to make sure they're doing the stuff on social distance and everything with with that. But that's why we continue. Why we continue to put. I shouldn't say push hydroxy, but give it its platform. Right? Is that we think that that's one thing that's got to be considered. Right? Along with this, obviously the liability issues. Now, the Meadows guys are saying, hey, we're not even going to start discussing really getting into negotiations of any other relief package until September. They're only here for 2 weeks. Remember, they come back on the 14th. I think they're gone 2 weeks later, and they're not back to after Election Day. So, look, we're heading towards, I don't know if this is the most important election in your lifetime. It's going to be the most contested election of your lifetime. This is going to be, they did the nullification project after Trump's come from behind victory in 2016. And this is going to be, I think Mike Cernovich is correct, at least in part of it. They're going to use every tool in the toolbox to come after people. They're going to use every tool in the toolbox to intimidate people. Let's go to Bradley Thayer is going to come on next time. We talk about South China Sea, but he's going to respond to, and I take great pride in this, the first time you've heard not China but Chinese Communist Party starting Monday night with Don Jr., Kimberly Guilfoyle, others, and going all the way through last night. Tom Cotton's tee-up of the president, his evisceration of Biden, and then the president just came in and eviscerated again. It wasn't like it's too good not to use again.
But I think we also need to look at the impact on the mind of the public watching this as it pertains to the pandemic, right? So the reason the Democrats were small and funky is because they were trying to use their thematics of their convention to show, hey, the country's not normal because of this pandemic and it's worse because of the president. And so they kind of intentionally trip themselves up, hoist themselves with their own petard because they were so concerned with trying to make things look more difficult and make life look more difficult. But the country has known in its heart for some time that all these protesters can go outside in the streets without masks and not having things. So what the Republican Party did and what the president did last night as it pertains to the pandemic is show, hey, we are going to get back to normal. We are going to get together. You know, the old song that played at the beginning of this pandemic when the Queen gave her address to the British public, it was "We'll meet again." And last night was really a "we'll meet again" moment.
Let's talk about the pandemic, Jack, since you're the expert. How do you think the Democrats, this is what the problem was, I thought, is that the Democrats did not put out a alternative. They can continue to complain against Trump, and Trump defended himself. I know it blew their heads up this week because it was relentless. Every day, I blocked from China, I got testing, I did ventilators, and the Democrats are just, they think, oh my God, he's convincing low information voters. We've got to fact check every time. Get the Philip Bump at the Washington Post on the phone, right? Give me a fact check. But they have not still proposed a coherent. They talked about President being incoherent. They have not proposed a coherent. If Senator Harris flew in just to do the pre-buttal yesterday, and her pre-buttal was central to their pandemic, I don't really see how that's updated or even thought through more than the March plan. Jump in here, guys.
I think we have clips, right, of Kamala.
Yeah, we have a few clips. The Kamala speech, just the pre-buttal, just totally fell flat. She was making all these, again, as you said, pathos type appeals.
Clip 3, clip 4. Let's roll clip 4. Let's get that teed up, AVN, while we lead into it. It was pathos. It was emotionally driven. There was no substance to it. And like Steve says, they didn't even come out and really update their plan.
She came out and said Joe Biden had a March 25th plan, and that's what they're pushing. But let's roll this clip.
Before the virus hit, Trump made our country vulnerable. After it was struck, he failed to do what was necessary. As it continues, he's making it worse every day.
What I find incredible about her is the delivery is so small. It's so bad. And she's clearly struggling to read from a prompter there. And I don't know if you guys saw the Anderson Cooper interview with Joe Biden. Joe Biden was clearly reading from notes on the table in front of him. He kept glancing down at the table.
Here's one thing, and we can tell this from the show, so maybe they take a lesson from War of Pandemic. It's granularity. If you're going to sit up there, we're so far, I think, the American people, they understand you got a pandemic, an economic inferno, all of that. They get it because their lives are affected by it. They want details. They want facts. She sits up there, and it's just this kind of hollow rhetoric, which is what you saw last week. Vish went Oxford on me, or Raheem Kassam on me, and said it's all pathos. Not logos and
no ethos.
No ethos and no logos. They don't have the Aristotelian. They don't understand that the American people, the deplorables, working men, Lao Beijing, they don't want to hear the rhetorical flourishes anymore. It's one of the reasons that they still don't understand Donald Trump. He hits you like a jackhammer right in the solar plexus, but he connects with the common man. They understand. He doesn't speak in a political vernacular, and that's what drives them nuts. I knew last night they were in meltdown when they saw that not only did he do it at the White House, he did it at a scale of the White House, and I knew that from the troll on the escalator scene to the end with the great from La Scala or from with the Milan Opera, right?
Yeah, Nessun Dorma.
Yeah, Nessun Dorma. By the way, you remember that from the Turin Winter Olympics. Vish.
Yeah, that's that. I knew that speech and that finish was going to be lit as soon as he came down those stairs. I immediately knew, first of all, my mind went right back to the campaign, the 2015 campaign announcement, and I feel like he recreated that scene. And also
100%.
there's some symbolism there of him walking down from the White House and then accepting his nomination, like, I am now here for the campaign and I'm going full speed, right? Yeah. And then finish with the literal bang.
Yeah, and the lyrics again of the opera, I will win, I will win. And you know who else is blowing up over this? Very clearly is upset by this. Is the Drudge Report. The homepage of the Drudge Report is nothing. You'd think they'd have the big imagery from last night, something. He's got some cartoons, things there.
All the media is in the mumble tank. They have no unified message on what's wrong with this.
Yeah. Right? Got to go to Citizens Free Press, Revolver, these other sites that are starting to come up. You would think you'd have to have the scale. You'd have to have the beautiful imagery, because they're using imagery in a very way. Biden has got to come out of the box. They flushed him out. I've said this now for months. You're not going to talk him out of there. You're going to force him out. The forcing function is action. Their actions last night, he just cannot continue to hide. The Proof of Life podcast did not work. So Jill's got to take the bib off, pack him a lunch, send him out into the cold, cruel world, right? With that, he's got a script on Anderson Cooper. If you need a script on Anderson Cooper, brother, come on. Come on, man.
Come on, man.
Come on, man.
Come on, man.
Okay, we're going to return. Take you to the South China Sea with Dr. Bradley Thayer next.
The hottest new razor is taking the men's grooming world by storm. And if you don't have it, you need it. Micro Touch Solo, the hyper-advanced full-body razor that trims, shapes, edges, and even shaves with micro precision. And it's totally safe to the touch. Go solo for full body control with one tool. No nicks, bumps, or ingrown hairs. Edge beards and goatees with one touch. Clean your neck, barber shop perfect. And check this out. Snap on the guide to tame growth and perfectly shape your full beard. And keep new growth stubble trimmed exactly to your style. And look, the Solo Full Body Groomer trims precisely the length of hair you want. Snap off the guide and remove unwanted hair anywhere in seconds. What makes Solo different than your ordinary razor? Dual-sided German stainless steel blade. Shave up or down at 200 microstrokes per second. The Ultra Flex pivoting head contours perfectly to you for precise results. 3 custom grooming guides for control of exact length and shape. And a built-in LED light so you never miss a spot. Solo is so precise, you need no creams, no soaps, and no water. Ditch the old man clippers and toss the scissors. You've got to go solo. Call 1-800-709-9777 or go online at microtouchsolo.com and get yours now for only $19.99. Complete with German stainless steel blade, pivoting head, built-in spotlight, and 3 custom grooming guides. Everything you see here for just $19.99. The all-new MicroTouch Solo Full
Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Joe Biden coddled socialist dictators in Cuba and Venezuela. President Trump fights against communism in America's backyard and around the world. And on the Communist Party of China, there is no comparison. Joe Biden aided and abetted China's rise for 50 years with terrible trade deals that closed our factories and laid off our workers. President Trump stands up to China's cheating and stealing and lying. Joe Biden allowed Chinese fentanyl to flood across our southern border. President Trump sanctioned Chinese drug dealers for poisoning our kids. Joe Biden said Chinese communists aren't even our competitor, aren't bad folks. Just months before they unleashed this plague on the world. President Trump is clear-eyed about the Chinese threat, and he is making China pay. But China's not giving up. In fact, they're rooting for Joe Biden. America's other enemies won't give up either. But Joe Biden would be as wrong and weak over the next 4 years as he has.
Welcome back to the War Room, America's Voice, Newsmax TV, G News, G Media, and subtitle in Mandarin, John Fredericks Radio Network, ubiquitous, Pluto TV, Roku, thank you.
Okay, Boomer.
Okay, thank you. Everywhere, ubiquitous, and now over 13.2 million downloads on the podcast, which is amazing given we're everywhere else. I don't believe ever in a national convention, at least in modern history, even during the height of the Cold War, I don't think we've ever had a beatdown by a sitting United States senator who's running unopposed in this election. Senator Tom Cotton of Arkansas aided and abetted the rise of China, aided and abetted the Chinese Communist Party, got the lingo right, got the nomenclature right. It's not China, it's not the Chinese people, they're the victims here. Aided and abetted their rise, accused them of supporting and working with the drug cartels in fentanyl, which is 50,000 people a year. That's an act of war. And then unleashed the plague from China, the Chinese Communist Party. And he said, aided and abetted, and that they're rooting for him. That the Democratic Party and Joe Biden personally has got to respond to this. Right? This is a throwdown. This guy's not he's not a guy, he's not somebody in the War Room Pandemic. We pride ourselves in exposing this every day. But this is a sitting United States senator who I think was in the short list. When I say short list, top 3 to 5 of guys for 2024, people considering for president of the United States. He's former 101st Airborne, Harvard Law, right? And volunteered after that. After law school, instead of going to Wall Street and some white shoe law firm, became a paratrooper, air assault, and had 3 combat tours in the wars in the Middle East and Afghanistan and Iraq. This guy's a hero, and he threw down on Joe Biden yesterday. Joe Biden and the Democrats, they've gone total crickets on China. They think they can avoid it. This is going to be a defining. Richard Haas is just wrong. There was every night there was just hammers on this. I want to bring in now one of the smartest guys about this to talk about, particularly our Hampton Roads audience. We know that the greatest naval base in the world, Norfolk. We're bringing in now Dr. Bradley Thayer. Before we talk about the South China Sea and the CCP, Dr. Thayer, I've got to get your response to or your observations on Tom Cotton's throwdown of not just Joe Biden, but also the Chinese Communist Party. If I'm in Beijing last night watching that, or I guess it was early morning Friday in Beijing, I'm not feeling very well. What's your observations about Cotton going after Beijing and going after Biden as basically a collaborator?
It was a very, very significant speech, what Senator Cotton accomplished last night. From Beijing's perspective, I think they're beginning to recognize that the situation is changing, right? A line has been crossed. And Cotton and others, as well as President Trump's speech last night, are really starting to frame American interests and the way forward, which are sensitive to the new realities of international politics, which is that China is now a pure competitor of the United States, and the United States needs to resist it. So Cotton and Trump, I see both of those speeches as being akin to Churchill's 1946 Iron Curtain speech, or shades of Ronald Reagan's 1983 Evil Empire speech, where in both of those instances a line was drawn between the old order, the old regime, and the new realities of pure competition. So Biden and so many others in the political elite of the United States, as well as Wall Street, financiers, and so many others, worked hand in glove with the Chinese Communist Party and profited from that to the great cost of the interests of the United States, of dangers to the homeland, to U.S. manufacturing, and global interests, our alliance relationships, and other very significant issues that we have in international politics. So Biden is really the old regime. He's the one who wants to get along with China. China's not a threat, right? We can go back to the way it used to be, right, before Trump was elected. But, of course, there's no going back to that. And there's no going back to a China that's willing to be subordinate to the United States or to a liberal international order. In fact, the CCP is creating their own order in international politics, which is a direct threat to the United States, our interests, and our allies.
We have talked, you said there's no going back to the old order. And I've said for a while, the international rules-based post-war order, the problem is that China changed us. China, it wasn't really an order because they got in and changed the rules of the game and everybody went along with it. It wasn't really rules-based. It was their rules, the way they interpreted them. And that's what the financiers in the City of London and Wall Street and the global corporations played along with it. And that's what had to be broken. That's the boil that Donald Trump lanced. But last night, I agree with you. I think he saw an inflection point. Now, I want to get in while we've got about 4 minutes left. I got to ask you about the South China Sea, because we keep talking about, you're the first one that, brought it to our attention the years ago, the unrestricted warfare, economic war, information war, tech war, not kinetic war. Is this activity in the South China Sea of the Chinese starting to fire missiles? Are we inexorably being drawn in, you think, to a shooting war in the South China Sea?
Well, there's always the risk of that. What we're seeing is the contrasting interests of the United States for freedom of navigation, for support of allies, and the status quo versus Beijing's interest to take control that space, right? In keeping with what they're also doing in pressuring India, threats to Taiwan, conceivably against Mongolia relatively soon. So we're seeing that contest of interests. And as part of that, although we've been relatively tardy in responding, right, we're beginning to see the right conventional force posture flowing to the South China Sea. We're seeing greater support from allies who had reason to doubt whether the United States was going to be for them, be there for them in the face of China's rise and expansion. So territory is zero sum, right? Either they're going to own it or we're going to own it. And so that poses the central problem that as our interests clash, there's going to be a military component of that, as there already is, between U.S. Navy and People's Liberation Army Navy and their maritime forces, the equivalent of their Coast Guard. So there's always the risk there of escalation. That as we had with the Soviet Union, we had an incident at sea treaty because we recognized that, ships bumping up against one another from opposing nations is not a good idea. So what we tried to do with the Soviets was to separate that, right? We don't have anything like that with China, right? So it's quite likely that there's going to be incidences between surface vessels in the South China Sea. And therein is always the risk of escalation.
Let me ask you something. We got about a minute and a half left. I want to ask you, Joe Biden's been essentially crickets. They're criticizing Trump. It's incoherent. He doesn't work with allies. It's all this America first. But the Biden campaign has not come back and responded to this all. Do you believe they have to now with the throwdown of Tom Cotton and Donald Trump last night from the White House?
It's in their interest to respond to that. It's in their interest to explain their positions on China. This should not be a partisan issue. It should be bipartisan. Right? That U.S. Interest in international politics and U.S. power and the liberal order that it created should be sustained, and China should be resisted. Right? That should be almost all Americans should subscribe to that view and that belief. So the response is necessary, and the form that it will take is risky for the Biden campaign. They cannot be cast as defending the old regime, right, even if that's their inclination. And so they're going to have to begin to grudgingly and indirectly, obliquely, recognize that Trump was right on China and that it is a threat to the U.S. and the international order, and it needs to be checked.
Dr. Thayer, how do people get access to your Twitter handle and your writings?
Well, I tweet with my colleague Lin Chao Han at Thayer Han and the number 1. So THAYERHAN and 1. Thank you very much.
Lin Chao. Dr. Thayer, thank you very much for joining us today in the War Room. Okay, we're going to take a short commercial break. When we come back, we're going to get into more of this. One of the central parts that unites the Republican Party, I think unites the American people, is this attitude towards the Chinese Communist Party. Bill Gertz will join us next.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
And before the China virus came in, produced the best unemployment numbers for African Americans, Hispanic Americans, and Asian Americans ever recorded.
The China virus. Okay, now we've got one of the top experts. Just had Dr. Bradley Thayer, an academic and a brilliant guy. Now we've got a man in the action, Bill Gertz, top investigative reporter. Got a great story. National Pulse is breaking. We'll get to that in a minute. I want to, Gertz, everybody wanted to know and have you on today, your response in thinking of Tom Cotton's throwdown last night to Beijing and to Biden and then Donald Trump. So I want to go first to Beijing. How do you think they're responding to the Chinese Communist Party when for the first time ever they were called out by name? Not China, not the Chinese people, the Chinese Communist Party. First time they've ever been called out at a national convention or really in a national forum. What do you think they're chewing on today?
Usually they take a couple of days to digest some of these speeches, but already I can tell you that China has been engaged in a massive anti-U.S. propaganda campaign for the last several months. And this campaign is focused primarily on Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, who's been vilified. They put cartoons in there. They are all blaming him for souring U.S.-China relations, when in fact what they're really doing is putting U.S.-China relations on a real footing. They're saying, look, we can no longer allow China to rip us off technologically. I had a column this week from an FBI report that said the amounts are 225 billion to 600 billion annually in theft of technology by China from the United States. No nation can survive with that kind of technology theft. But clearly they'll probably ratchet up their propaganda campaign. They're going to basically continue to push the idea that the United States is making a mistake by taking a hard line on China.
What about the Biden campaign? Has been, and by the way, we're with Bill Gertz of the Washington Times. He's got great stories. We're going to get into all of them, including the tech theft. The Biden campaign, they've been essentially crickets on this, right? A couple of months ago, they tried a little to do some reverse jujitsu and try to say Trump was weak on China. But they've been stunningly passive about this. Given the types and depths of throwdown last night, and just Tom Cotton said that they aided and abetted the rise of the Chinese Communist Party, that they were guilty of supporting the drug cartels and shipping fentanyl here, which I think kills 50,000 people a year, right? It's the first plague they sent us. And that they are, and that they unleashed this global plague, which I say, hey, if they unleashed it, then, we ought to be thinking about genocide. It's CCP lied, Americans died. CCP lied, Chinese citizens died. CCP lied, Canadians, Australians, Europeans died. Having Cotton throw down and then Trump following because Cotton was there to tee up. Can Biden just avoid this, or now the American people I think are starting to get the facts here and the focus? Can Biden avoid this, or eventually they're going to have to address it, Bill?
Well, in terms of the political campaign, I think Biden is definitely going to have to take a harder line, and the reason is because so many American workers, the Trump administration and President Trump in particular has stolen the working man argument narrative from the Democrats. It used to be that the Democrats were always a supporter of the working man, the average person. Clearly, the Republicans are in the lead on that now. And the Democrats, if they're going to win, they're going to have to try and take that away from the Republicans. And again, it's a major political campaign issue. So they're going to make some more noises about trying to bring back jobs, to try and put pressure on China. But I think the record is clear. Biden and Obama and successive administrations, both Republican and Democrat, basically had this appeasement approach to China, which was devastating for the American economy, devastating for our industrial base, and devastating for the future of the country. We're on track now with the harder line policies by the Trump administration to rectify some of these wrongs. And that's a winning issue, I think, for the Republicans.
Dr. Thayer said that Biden can't be a supporter of the old regime. You can't go back to the way it was, this kind of not just linkage, but worse than accommodation, really exacerbating their rise. This thing about the Thucydides trap, where we're the declining power, they're the rising power, and let's nudge them so that they kind of take on more of our stuff, that the wealthier they get, the freer they will get, which is all nonsense. Do you think in their mind that the Democrats think that they can go back? When you clearly see a decoupling, big story today in one of the British papers about how they're focused on, the Eurasian landmass we keep talking about with Russia and Turkey and Iran and Pakistan and North Korea, and One Belt, One Road, that they're looking to build that domestic market globally, and they're thinking about Germany, etc. Do you think that Biden is soft walking this or slow walking this so that they can, if they beat Trump, they can go back to the way things were?
Oh, absolutely. I think Biden represents the ruling class in the worst connotation of all. I mean, they want to go back to doing business with China, the old school method, the appeasement of China, just trade with them, and that will have a moderating influence. And they're going to ignore the theft. They're going to ignore the expansionism, the mercantilism that we're seeing in, as you mentioned, the Belt and Road Initiative. So they're going to make a lot of noises during the campaign about being tough on China. But in reality, they represent the failed ruling class policies of the last 30 years, which have created this monster of the Chinese Communist Party ruled China aggressiveness and assertiveness that we're seeing, especially in places like the South China Sea, East China Sea, and towards Taiwan. I think those are the real flashpoints that, beyond economics, that's really the security threats that we're facing from China. They've got a bunch of new weapon systems. They just tested some advanced missiles in the South China Sea. They're sending a message, and they're untested in battle, and their military is going to try. They could very easily miscalculate, and that's again what the Pentagon fears most: is that some Chinese general will miscalculate and set off a regional conflict with the United States.
The reason they have these missiles and they're able to do it is, back to your FBI report, the technology theft. At the $600 billion a year, I saw analysis has been $3 trillion. Like in the last 10 years, or some extraordinary number, $3 trillion of our intellectual property not paid for at all, not monetized, but $3 trillion has basically been lifted by the Chinese Communist Party. It's one of the reasons they've got all this advancement in on the internet in these tech companies, but it's also military hardware. How did we allow that to happen, Bill? And is the Trump administration crackdown hard enough?
We allowed it to happen because of these appeasement policies. I traced this going back 20 years and longer. And the argument was, let's not pressure the Chinese. And the Chinese played a brilliant strategic game to fool the United States, successive government officials. Listen, we're the future, invest in us, don't pressure us because we have 1.4 billion people. If we collapse, then we'll have major problems for the entire world. So they sold that false narrative to successive administrations, and it's resonated. They've literally bought off former politicians, corporations, business leaders. This FBI report, which I reported on in the Washington Times, is really eye-opening in presenting case studies of how they did it. And it involved both the commercial sector, where they stole advanced technology, and in the official government sector, where they literally were engaged in traditional espionage, getting contractors to give them classified defense information. And all of this was going into a highly centralized program that Beijing was organized to both modernize the civilian economy, but in a more threatening sense, to build up their military forces with one goal in mind, and that goal is to confront and ultimately clash and defeat the United States in a future conflict.
Well, Bill, I wanted to get your take on this as well. I'm literally hitting the publish button right now on a big scoop on the National Pulse website about the former Republican senator and Clinton-era Secretary of Defense, William Cohen. Now, William Cohen made headlines a couple of days ago, which is particularly bad when you've got Natalie Winters watching out, but made headlines for endorsing Joe Biden. We went and looked at who William Cohen has been working for and with over the last few years, and it appears that he runs this consulting group, his own consulting group, called the Cohen Group, which specifically has a China practice side of it, and the China practice side of it appears to employ Chinese Communist Party officials. Bill, is this something that has been well and long known? Because I look at the other names on the homepage of the Cohen Group, and you have people even by the likes of, like James Mattis, for instance, is a brand new senior counselor for the Cohen Group.
Yes, I know Bill Cohen from his time as defense secretary during the 90s. I traveled with him to China on several occasions. It is surprising. His Cohen group has always been among the most pro-China in terms of playing down the threat from China and engaging in unfettered business engagement, and at great, I think, detriment to the American national security. They've looked the other way on China's nefarious activities, and they've just tried to make as much money as possible. I mean, this is right in the model of what Henry Kissinger has done for decades, which was make tens of millions of dollars connecting companies in China through his connections with Chinese leaders and Chinese officials. It's part and parcel of something that the Trump administration needs to address, and that is the Chinese influence threat. We've looked at their technology theft threat, we've looked at their military threat, but very little has been done on the influence side of things. We need to identify the Chinese influence networks in the United States, their paid and unpaid agents, and what they're doing. There have been some impressive prosecutions by the Justice Department on a lot of these cases, but much more needs to be done. I think the FBI really needs to step up its game when it comes to Chinese influence operations.
Bill, can we? Is it possible to hold you over through the next segment? Is that a possibility?
Yeah. Sure.
Okay. I want to start. There's this thing breaking this week. Let's start with it, and we'll do it over the break. About the Nikki Lum Davis. I guess the FBI, there's a criminal complaint about her. She's a fundraiser. I know you're doing some analysis on that, and it's really back in your book, Deceiving the Sky, which is a must-read. We'll put the cover up on it in the next segment. Deceiving the Sky, the amazing book you wrote about the Chinese Communist Party versus the United States. Walk us through what's happening there. We got about a minute, and then we'll jump a break and bring you back to finish.
Well, sure. There was a what's known as a criminal information released by prosecutors in Hawaii last week, and this information, in a very loosely masked fashion, outlined a major lobbying effort on behalf of China by a number of people, including a political consultant in Hawaii named Nikki Lum Davis, and it involves Elliot Broidy, a former Republican financier, Los Angeles-based financial guy, as well as a former hip-hop rapper named Praz Michael, and of course the fugitive financier Low-Tech Joe. He's wanted for money laundering and embezzlement regarding some $4 billion from the 1MDD Malaysian bank scam.
Bill, can you hang on 1 second, take a short commercial break? Be back with Bill Gertz, Washington Times influence operations next.
Brett Favre, legendary quarterback. Jerry Rice, legendary wide receiver.
You ready for your weekly meeting?
Yeah, we're ready.
Let's do this. Let's stack the deck. When legends play, they wear Copperfit Advanced Back Pro. Copperfit's best-selling compression back support just got better with new double-band adjustable supports for customizable compression when you need it most.
Since I put this on, I feel so much better. The core is the most important thing. To know that I'm stabilized here. Whatever I'm doing, I can give it 100%.
4 built-in stabilizing supports designed to improve posture and help reduce lower back stress and strain.
You have back pain, and it's affecting your everyday life. You do something.
If you can find something to help you get back out and be active like Copperfit, go for it.
Absolutely.
Do not give up. A high-performance compression fabric infused with the powerful properties of copper, 360-degree flexible mobility, and lightweight, durable construction.
Nothing more painful than having back pains. If you're aching, if you feel like you can't work out anymore, you can. And that's with Copperfit.
Yeah. It's for all of us who still want to be active, still want to compete.
Way to go. That's what I'm talking about. Man, this really does feel good. It feels to me like the fountain of youth.
Copperfit's best-selling back support just got bigger, badder, and better. Or call 1-800-944-5851. Or on the web at advancedbackpro.com. Get yours now for only $19.99.
This does feel good. That's what I've been saying. You think it was fair? It was fun.
Play for the love of the game.
Copperfit, live limitless.
Frustrated with heavy rubber hoses that always get tangled and easily kink? Introducing the Bionic Flex Pro hose, the super strong, super tough hose that's ultra light as well. Run over an ordinary hose and it'll easily burst, but the Bionic Flex Pro hose stays intact no matter what runs over it, because its reinforced drag-resistant commercial-grade outer polyester weave makes it tougher and stronger than ever. And its solid brass fittings are crush-proof too. Ordinary hoses kink easily and stop working, but the Bionic Flex Pro hose never kinks. It just keeps flowing strong. And while regular hoses easily get tangled, the Bionic Flex Pro hose is tangle-proof. You can get the 25-foot Bionic Flex Pro hose for just $19.95 with free shipping. But wait, order today and we'll upgrade your order to a 50-foot Bionic Flex Pro hose. Just pay a separate fee, and shipping is still free. Go now.
Call 1-800-313-8062.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
It's game on day, because last night was the end of, not the end of the beginning, but it is the end of one phase, and now starts the run-up, 60 days, 60 and I wake up or close to it until we have the last day of voting. That's November 3rd. Vish, where are the Democrats and the mainstream media this morning?
Total mumble tank. There's no unified message. There's no proper attack line. They're just in the mumble tank.
They weren't expecting it, were they not, Mr. Rahim Kassam?
Well, I'm going through the liberal media homepages here. CNN's leading with Jacob Blake and what happened to Jacob Blake when he woke up after he was shot. MSNBC is rolling with no one was wearing masks last night. BBC America's leading with Top Gear. The Washington Post talking about violence across the United States as its lead on their site right now. And the New York Times, Republicans cast election as crusade against violent disorder.
This is a tell. Only the New York Times got it. The crusade starts. Okay, I want to go back to Bill Gertz, the Washington Times. Before we continue with the Nikki Lum Davis, quickly, Bill, a huge breaking news today. Prime Minister Abe stepping down. He's with Modi, Morrison in Australia, Modi in India, one of our partners in this Alliance of Liberty. How big a deal is this?
Very important. He is absolutely a central core ally for the United States, specifically when it comes to China. He's been a hawk on China. He's been very tough. Again, he also, of course, the media is not playing that up. They're all playing his role in what's known as Abenomics or Abe economics. He has said that he's in ill health, and as a result of his ill health, he's going to step down. That means the next prime minister is going to have a big challenge. I can tell you right now, the big debate within Japan is over whether to be tough on China or whether to bolster the healthcare system for Japan's aging population. Again, Abe was a tremendous ally for the United States and was very, very clear-eyed on the threat from China.
By the way, it sounds like the debate here in America, tough on China or, do these domestic issues while we implode. Bill, let's go back to the influencers. In deceiving the sky, the importance of what they've been trying to do, how they're spreading money into government officials. You got Higginbotham. And particularly, I want to wrap up with Milesguo. They're spending tens of millions of dollars to trying to extract our colleague that's been so powerful in the whistleblower movement, the new federal state, and exposing the CCP.
Yeah, it's a two-pronged illicit lobbying effort involving the Chinese Communist Party. I think what was new in the information released in Hawaii last week was this meeting that took place in Shenzhen in 2017 between Sun Lijun, who was at the time the Vice Minister of Public Security, one of the most senior Communist Party of China officials involved in security matters. And he had a meeting with this woman, Nikki Lum Davis, as well as Elliot Broidy, and also Jo Tek Low, the fugitive Malaysian financier. And at that meeting, they launched a two-pronged lobbying effort. One was to lobby senior American officials, including the Attorney General at the time, Jeff Sessions, the Director of Homeland Security at the time, that was John Kelly, and also the president himself. And it's a fairly extraordinary case. And again, I outlined most of it in my book, Deceiving the Sky. The second part was to go after Milesguo, who is this dissident billionaire who is a hero to millions of Chinese who want to see an end to the Communist Party of China. And this identifies an effort to lobby the United States on behalf of China and Sun Lijun, this Vice Minister of Public Security, to forcibly repatriate Guo Wengui, Miles Kwok. He goes by both names. And this was a real eye-opener to see this. In my book, I had a statement from Mr. Guo who said, "This is my so-called $2 billion life." What the information didn't have, and which I had, shows that these people had a plan, a scheme. And the scheme was that they believed that Abu Dhabi, that they falsely accused Mr. Guo of taking $2 billion from Abu Dhabi. And their plan was to convince the Trump administration to extradite Guo to Abu Dhabi and then on to China. And in exchange, they would cash in on the supposed $2 billion that they would get from returning Guo there. It's a remarkable story, and it involves some of the most powerful people. I think one thing that I also had was that Steve Wynn, the former Las Vegas casino magnate, was involved, where this financier, Elliot Broidy, who was deputy finance chair for the Republican National Committee, went to Steve Wynn, and on his boat, they actually called President Trump and tried to find out how they could get Guo Wengui sent back to China. As you're probably aware of this from your time at the White House, luckily the president didn't do that, and cooler heads prevailed within the White House, and they said, no, we've got to keep this guy here. He's an important resource for understanding the details of what's going on inside the Communist Party of China, and we've got to protect him.
Last thing, do you think we ever go back to the old ways? Do you think we ever go back to the now that it is clearly a throwdown and they're starting to expose the influence operations, the connections on Wall Street, corporate America? Do you think as more and more information comes out that there's any possibility that people realize that these people, the Chinese Communist Party, is at war with the United States? You can say as nicely as you want, maybe it's not a kinetic war now, but certainly an economic, information, technology war, as outlined in the FBI report and all that. We got about 30 seconds, Bill.
I think it's still, it's not codified in law. All of the best things that the United States has done regarding China have been put into law. The 1979 Taiwan Relations Act made Taiwan an unofficial ally. The Tiananmen sanctions that were imposed after the massacre in 1989 are still in place. Those are the kinds of things that need to be done to codify the Trump administration's policies. And I don't see that happening between now and the end of the year. However, a second Trump administration should clearly work on establishing really strong legislative curbs to, first of all, identify China as the enemy, as an adversary, not just a strategic competitor, but the enemy of the United States that seeks our destruction. And we need to better educate the American public to that, and we need to better educate our policymakers and leaders.
Bill, fantastic. Enemy of the United States. We got the music to go. Okay. It's grid out. Tomorrow, Milesguo, CCP's War Against the World, special edition.
Stay tuned to get a free pan from Granite Stone. Stuck on eggs, burnt on batter. You can scrub and scrape, but you can't escape the nightmare of your sticky pans. Introducing the Granite Stone Pan, the all-new durable non-stick pan. No butter or oil needed. Watch, we melted down these sticky candies in Granite Stone, and it just doesn't stick. We cooked a half a dozen eggs, bacon, cheese, and tomato breakfast with no butter or oil, and it just doesn't stick. Look, caramels, chocolate, and cheese. Unreal for any other pan, but not for Granite Stone. It just doesn't stick. Granite Stone will be the last pan you'll ever need because it's pressed from a solid aluminum disc for even heat conduction, then coated 3 times with our durable Granite Stone finish. Granite Stone is metal utensil safe and won't scratch. And talk about non-stick. This salmon cooked skin side down with no added butter or oil just doesn't stick. This steak is perfectly seared just like the pros. And because Granite Stone is oven rated to 500 degrees, we bake this upside down pan pizza to perfection, and it just doesn't stick. Fire Flambe Delicious Cherries Jubilee. Plus it's PFOA free and 100% dishwasher safe.